In the year 2157, humanity believed it had found salvation in the stars, not among distant worlds, but suspended just above the one they had destroyed. Earth hung below like a poisoned jewel, shrouded in toxic clouds and radioactive storms. Above it, gleaming like tears frozen in space, floated the orbital cities, 17 crystalline domes that housed the last 3 million souls of the human race. Inside Dome 7, Dr. Kalen Dross moved through corridors that never knew night or day, only the eternal glow of artificial suns. The walls curved upward in perfect arcs, transparent aluminum offering glimpses of the void beyond. Citizens passed him in the hallways, their faces serene, their movements purposeful. No one hurried, no one lingered, no one questioned. Systems nominal, Kalen muttered to himself as he walked. Temperature stable, population count 178,429, all within acceptable parameters. His thoughts were precise, clinical. They had to be. The Council of Continuity had spent generations perfecting the human mind, editing out the chaos of emotion, the waste of wonder. Efficiency was survival, control was peace. But on this morning, though morning was merely a designation here, something flickered in the data streams, a shadow in the light. Colin paused at his workstation, fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed the vital signs of their world. What is that?" he whispered. The anomaly lasted less than a microsecond, a tremor in the glass horizon, the vast energy field that held their cities aloft. To anyone else, it would have been invisible. But Kalen had been watching the horizon for 15 years. Knew its rhythms like his own heartbeat. The engineering bay stretched out like a cathedral of chrome and light. Here, the glass horizon's generators hummed with contained power, creating the invisible barrier that kept 3 million people from plummeting into the toxic wasteland below. Kylan stood before the central display, his reflection ghosted in the screen's surface. "Central Command, this is Systems Engineer Dross," he spoke into his comm device. "I'm reading microscopic fluctuations in grid section 7 alpha." The response was immediate, mechanical. "Acknowledged, Engineer Dross. Are the fluctuations within tolerance?" Kalen hesitated. "Technically, yes, but the pattern is irregular. I recommend a full diagnostic. The horizon has operated flawlessly for 127 years, Engineer. Focus on your assigned maintenance protocols." The communication ended with a sharp tone, leaving Kalen alone with his doubts. He stared at the data streaming across his displays. The fluctuation was there, a hairline fracture in perfection. His programming told him to dismiss it, to trust the system. But something deeper, something that felt almost like memory, urged him to look closer. "What are you hiding?" he whispered to the machines. As he delved deeper into the system's architecture, layers of code peeled away like digital skin. The horizon wasn't just a shield, it was a filter. Frequencies were being blocked, signals suppressed, and buried in the quantum static, something was trying to break through. It was a transmission from Earth. That night, Kylan couldn't sleep. Sleep was regulated, of course, 8 hours precisely, from 2200 to 600, but his mind raced against the artificial calm that usually carried him into unconsciousness. "Earth is dead," he told himself, tossing restlessly in his regulation bed. "Has been for over a century. The radiation levels, the atmospheric toxicity, nothing could survive down there. Nothing. But the signal said otherwise. Colin had isolated it just before leaving the engineering bay, a transmission so faint it barely registered on the most sensitive equipment. Most of it was garbled, distorted by the horizon's filtering systems. But one phrase had come through clearly, repeating like a heartbeat: "We remember, we remember, we remember." The words sent something cold through Kalen's chest. Memory was supposed to be perfect in the domes, archived, indexed, controlled. The Council had eliminated the chaos of organic memory, replacing it with digital precision. No one forgot anything they were supposed to know, and no one remembered anything they weren't. Before he realized it, Kalen was walking. The corridors were dimly lit during sleep cycle, but his clearance would get him into the engineering bay. He had to know more. The engineering bay felt different in the artificial night. Shadows pooled in the corners where the emergency lighting couldn't reach. Kylan's fingers trembled as he accessed the deep archives, files buried beneath layers of security protocols. "Come on," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the perfect climate control. "Show me what you're hiding." The first files were historical records: the Great Evacuation, the construction of the domes, the last desperate flight from a dying world. The images were stark: blackened cities, poisoned seas, skies choked with ash. Everything he had been taught was there, documented with bureaucratic precision. But as Kylan dug deeper, he found gaps, inconsistencies, dates that didn't align, population figures that fluctuated without explanation. And then, buried in a subsection marked Environmental Monitoring, Discontinued, he found something that made his blood freeze. "This can't be right," he breathed. The files showed atmospheric readings from Earth, but not from a century ago. These were from last month, last week, yesterday. The radiation levels were declining. The toxic storms were weakening. And in the infrared satellite images, he could see something impossible: lights, settlements, life. Earth wasn't dead, it was healing. And humanity, or something that had once been humanity, was thriving on its surface. Kylan spent 3 days in a haze, performing his duties while his mind reeled from what he had discovered. The transmission from Earth grew stronger each day, as if sensing his attention. More phrases emerged from the static. "The sky-born must return. The circle must close. We remember what was lost." The voice was human, but changed, harmonious in a way that seemed impossible, as if multiple people were speaking as one, their words carrying emotions that had been edited out of dome dwellers generations ago. "If Earth is alive, if people survived," Kylan paced his small quarters, speaking to himself like a madman, "then why are we still up here? Why haven't we been told?" The answer came to him with horrible clarity. The Council of Continuity didn't rule just a city. They ruled a universe. In the domes, they were gods, controlling every aspect of human existence. But on Earth, surrounded by wild spaces and uncontrolled growth, their authority would crumble like sand. That night, Kylan accessed files he had never seen before: personal records, medical histories, birth certificates. And there, in the deepest archives, he found his own name, but not the sanitized version he knew. This file spoke of a child taken from the surface during the final evacuations, his memories scrubbed clean, his past erased to make him a perfect citizen of the sky. "I was born down there," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was born on Earth." The knowledge hit Kylan like a physical blow. As if a dam had burst in his mind, fragments of memory began to seep through the barriers that had contained them for 32 years. He remembered sunlight, real sunlight, not the artificial glow of the dome's illumination. He remembered the sound of wind through leaves that chimed like crystal bells. He remembered voices singing in harmony, the same harmony he now heard in the transmissions from below. "The glass trees," he gasped, clutching his head as the memories flooded back. "They were so beautiful. And the rivers, they glowed at night like liquid starlight." The memories were fragmentary, seen through a child's eyes, but they carried a weight of truth that his manufactured recollections could never match. This was real. This was home. And he had been stolen from it. But the memories came with a price. Somewhere in the dome's surveillance network, algorithms were detecting anomalous brain patterns, emotional responses outside acceptable parameters. The Council would know soon that something was wrong with Dr. Kylan Dross. Counselor Thane arrived at the engineering bay flanked by 2 preservation officers, emotionless figures in white uniforms whose job was to maintain order through any means necessary. His face was a mask of practiced neutrality, betraying nothing of what lay beneath. "Dr. Dross," Thane said, his voice cold as the void between stars, "you've been accessing files beyond your clearance level." Kylan straightened, meeting the counselor's gaze without flinching. "The people have a right to know." "Earth isn't dead, Counselor. We could go home." Thane's laugh was hollow, mechanical. "Home. This is home, Doctor. Safe, ordered, perfect. Would you have us return to the chaos that nearly destroyed our species?" That chaos is called freedom. Kalen's voice rose, echoing through the vast chamber. Life! We're not living up here. We're just existing. Thane's expression never changed. In the domes, emotion was viewed as a malfunction, passion as a disease to be cured. You're suffering from memory bleed, doctor. A rare but treatable condition. Report to medical for immediate neural adjustment. No, the word hung in the air like a gunshot. In 127 years of dome civilization, no one had simply said no to the council. That wasn't a request, doctor, Thane said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The preservation officers moved forward, but before they could reach Kalen, the engineering bay's alarms began to wail. Red lights bathed the chamber as every display screen flickered with the same message, horizon integrity compromised. The fracture in the glass horizon had grown. What began as a microscopic flaw was now a visible distortion in the energy field, spreading like a crack in ice. And through that crack, Earth's signal poured in stronger than ever. "Skyborn, hear us!" the voices from below called out, clear and urgent. "The time of separation ends. The world below has healed. Come home." Throughout Dome 7, people stopped what they were doing. For the first time in their lives, they were hearing voices from the world their ancestors had fled. Children looked up at their parents with questions that had no programmed answers. "Shut it down!" Thane commanded, his composure finally cracking. "Shut down the transmission." Kylan shook his head, a strange calm settling over him. "I can't. The horizon is failing because it was never meant to last this long. You've been holding us prisoner with borrowed time." The truth was written in the engineering reports Kalen had memorized. The horizon generators were centuries beyond their intended lifespan, held together by constant patches and repairs. The council had known this day would come. They had simply hoped it would be someone else's problem. Kalen stood at the horizon's control matrix, his hands hovering over the manual override. Around him, the dome shuddered as the energy field weakened. He could feel the weight of 3 million lives pressing down on his decision. "I could patch it," he thought, his finger trembling over the controls. "Buy us more time. Let people adjust slowly to the idea that Earth is alive again. That would be the safe choice, the rational choice." But through the widening crack, he could hear them, the voices of Earth calling to their lost children. They sang of forests that grew in spirals toward the sky, of oceans that pulsed with bioluminescent life, of cities carved from living crystal. They sang of a world reborn, beautiful and strange and free. "Think about what you're doing, Dross." Thane's voice was desperate now, all pretense of control abandoned. "Without the domes, without control, humanity will destroy itself again." Kalen looked at the counselor, this man who had spent his entire life believing that safety was worth any price, even the price of being human. "Maybe," Kalen said quietly. "Or maybe we'll finally learn to live." He thought of the children in the corridors, their faces blank with artificial peace. He thought of artists who had never created because creation was inefficient. He thought of lovers who had never felt passion because passion was dangerous. He thought of himself, a man who had lived 32 years without knowing his own past. "We have the right to choose," he said, his voice growing stronger, "even if we choose wrong." Kalen's hand came down on the override. Alarms screamed throughout the dome as the glass horizon began to collapse, section by section. The invisible barrier that had held humanity captive for over a century dissolved like morning mist. Light flooded in, not the harsh radiation the dome dwellers expected, but a soft golden glow. Through the transparent walls, they could see Earth as it truly was, a world transformed, alive with colors that had no names. "We remember." The voices from Earth sang in triumphant harmony. "We remember you. Come home." Throughout the 17 domes, people pressed against the walls, staring down at the planet they had been taught to fear. They saw forests that moved like living things, rivers that flowed uphill defying gravity, mountains that hummed with an internal light. It was Earth, but Earth as it had never been, evolved, alien, magnificent. In the moments after the horizon fell, a profound silence settled over Dome 7. Not the silence of death, but the silence of possibility. For the first time in generations, humanity faced a choice with no predetermined outcome. "We remember," Kalen whispered, the words feeling ancient on his tongue, a phrase passed down through genetic memory from the first humans who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of home. Some people wept. The first tears shed in the domes in over a century. Others laughed with voices that cracked from disuse. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer, and for the first time, that was perfectly fine. "What have you done?" Thane asked, his voice barely audible, all authority drained from his frame. Callan turned to face the broken counselor. "I've given us back our birthright. The right to be human." The orbital transport systems hadn't been used for passenger service in living memory, but the engineers worked through the night to make them ready. Not everyone would choose to descend. Some would stay in the domes, perhaps as way stations between Earth and the stars. But for the first time in 127 years, it would be their choice to make. Kalen stood at the viewing port, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. The planet's new inhabitants had built their cities to follow natural patterns, spiraling up mountains like seashells, floating on crystal platforms above the transformed oceans. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely unknown. "I don't know if we're ready for this," he said to himself. "I don't know if we can survive down there. But we'll never know unless we try." A gentle hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see Dr. Elena Voss, a woman of 93 who was old enough to remember the last days before the evacuation. Unlike most dome citizens, traces of her original memories had never been fully erased. "None of us knows, my dear," she said with a kind smile. "That's what makes it an adventure." "I was 7 when they brought me up here," Dr. Voss continued, her eyes distant with remembrance. "I remember my grandmother's hands in the garden, the way morning glories climbed the walls of our house. Real walls made of stone and clay, not this perfect, sterile plastic." "Are you going down?" Kalen asked. She chuckled, the sound rusty from years of suppressed laughter. "At my age, I might not survive the descent, but my granddaughter is going, and her children. They'll carry something of me back to the world below." 3 days after the glass horizon shattered, the first transport descended through Earth's atmosphere. Kalen was aboard, along with 57 other volunteers, the bravest or perhaps the most desperate of Dome 7 citizens. As they broke through the cloud layer, they saw the landing site the Earth dwellers had prepared, a meadow of silver grass beside a lake that seemed to be made of liquid light. Figures waited for them there, human in shape but changed in ways that spoke of centuries of adaptation. The transport doors opened, and for the first time in over a century, dome-born humans breathed unfiltered Earth air. It tasted of ozone and growing things, of rain and rich soil and something indefinably alive. The Earth dweller who greeted them stood 7 feet tall, their skin bearing faint patterns that shifted like living tattoos. Their eyes held depths that spoke of connection to the living world around them. They were human, but human as humanity might become given time and freedom to grow. "Welcome home, Skyborn," they said, their voice a harmony of tones that resonated through Kalen's bones. "We have been waiting." Kalen stepped forward, his legs shaky on solid ground. We don't know how to live here anymore." The Earth dweller smiled, and in that expression, Kalen saw echoes of his own face, his own people. "Then we will remember together." In the months that followed, more transports descended. Some dome dwellers adapted to Earth's transformed landscape, learning to communicate with forests that thought collectively, to navigate rivers that flowed according to need rather than gravity. Others returned to the domes, unable to let go of the safety they had always known. Kalen built his home in the shadow of a glass tree, its leaves singing in harmonies that helped him remember dreams he'd thought were lost forever. He worked alongside the Earth Dwellers, learning their technologies that grew rather than being manufactured, their medicines that healed by singing to the body's own rhythms. Sometimes at night, he would look up at the domes still orbiting overhead, 17 pearls of light against the star-scattered darkness. They no longer seemed like prisons to him, nor like sanctuaries. They were simply choices made by people trying to find their own way of being human. "I used to think the Council was evil for keeping us prisoner," he said one evening to his companion, an Earth Dweller named Arya, who had become his teacher and friend. "Now I think they were just afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of chaos, afraid of letting humanity become something they couldn't predict or manage." He paused, watching a school of luminescent fish swim through the air above the lake, one of Earth's countless impossible wonders. "But being human isn't about being safe or controlled or perfect," he continued. "It's about being free to grow, to change, to become something more than what we were. Even if that something is dangerous, even if that something is unknown." Arya nodded, her patterned skin glowing softly in the twilight. "Your sky people will learn this in time. Change is the only constant. Growth is the only path forward. And so humanity took its first tentative steps into a new age, not as conquerors returning to claim a dead world, but as children coming home to a living one that had learned to dream in their absence. Some would stay in the sky, tending the careful gardens of order they had built. Others would walk the wild paths of Earth, learning to be human in ways their ancestors could never have imagined. Both choices were valid. Both were necessary. For the first time in over a century, humanity remembered what it meant to be free. In the end, that was all that mattered: the choice itself and the courage to make it. The glass horizon had shattered, and in its place stretched an infinite sky full of possibilities, each one as beautiful and terrifying as the freedom to be truly human.